scriptures this morning have been about following God. And we need to start by acknowledging that this is not simple. The first thing to acknowledge is that trying to figure out exactly what God wants is not that simple. And if you were here 2 weeks ago, you may remember that I challenged you to read Leviticus 19 sometime and figure out how many of those verses you thought still applied. Did anyone try that? I did. 13 out of 37 was my number. But there were 13 verses I go, yeah, that whole verse, that's still something I'd like to be following, and the other, like 24, I went, nope, not doing that anymore. Right? So while the psalm said, oh, the law of the Lord is perfect, apparently I don't believe that anymore. Because there were verses in there like, what to do, and it's just ugly stuff. Right? So we need to acknowledge that trying to figure out exactly what God wants is not simple and straightforward. And then we also need to remember that once we figure that out, it's often not easy to do. Right? That presumably, God wants us not to screw up the climate. But not doing that is not as simple and straightforward, because there's so many things we do just as a matter of course that don't help, that in fact hurt. But let's assume we can get past that, at least to the place where, yes, we say, we got a pretty good sense of what God wants. Humbly, we try to say that, but, at least we're heading in this direction, right? And it's important, I think, to do this in the right spirit. And so Psalm 19 sort of gives us some of that. So that it says the law of the Lord is perfect. Well, but it revives the soul. Soul is a bad translation here. The Hebrew word is nephesh, and it actually literally means throat. But it revives the life. Right? So the idea is that if you're following God's will, life is better. Right? It's more like Star Wars. The force within you is stronger, or something like that. Right? So don't think about like this. I don't know. The soul, anyway, is just a bad translation, but in some ways it's just the vessel we've got. So it revives the soul. And the decrees of the Lord are sure, making wise the simple. So there's understanding here that comes with this. And it's not just a matter of, well, there's a bunch of rules that we've got to follow, but there's a reward for this. And one of the rewards is wisdom. That if we're heading in God's way, we're supposed to be where we are acquiring wisdom. And the precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. So joy is part of this. And I continue to stand up here and speak to you about joy because it comes up in the book all the time. It's not like I keep making this up. It's like, no, joy shows up regularly in this book. And we need to keep remembering that. And as we do hospitality, and as we do outreach, and as we do all of these other little bits of it, right? Joy is supposed to be one of the things we're actually aiming for. It's okay to get together and just have a good time. Right? It's okay to be gathering at church and enjoying this as much as we possibly can. And the commandments of the Lord is clear, enlightening the eyes. Right? So there's something here also about knowledge. That's sort of the metaphor of enlightening the eyes. I was involved in a discussion last week, and we got into the topic of sort of faith versus science. And yeah, that's a tricky one. But according to this book, it's not tricky at all. Right? Faith and science is like two trains on parallel tracks. They're both heading in the same direction. They're both heading toward knowledge. And if you think they're two trains coming at each other on the same track, no, that's not the way this works. Right? That the law of the Lord is supposed to also enlighten the eyes, just like good science enlightens the eyes. But in all of these this is all part of the same movement toward knowledge and understanding, and right, hopefully then also wisdom a little. Again, that's not an automatic step. Right? You can have lots of knowledge and not have any wisdom at all. It's just a bunch of facts. But hopefully, again, right? So these are the results. Very kind of positive results. And then we need to keep this in mind, right? Because otherwise, the law of the Lord becomes really heavy. Right? Oh, here's a bunch of rules. And there are a bunch of religious rules. You've got to do all of these things. And it's so tiresome. And why do we bother? Right? Let's just forget it. And Psalm says, no, there's an actual reward. And And then Jesus adds to this, and he says, because one of the problems in following the law of God is like, so what difference does it make? So how can you tell? And so Jesus, one of the very first things he does is he goes, right? So again, some geography I think is helpful here. Right? Sometimes we do this here, that we sort of think about this space as ancient Israel. Do you guys remember this at all? Right? So if you imagine this is north, okay, and this is the Jordan River Valley. It's one of the nice things about this church is that geographically it's very Israel. Right? So this is our Jordan River Valley. Right? In the north is the Sea of Galilee. There's the Jordan River, and the Dead Sea down here south. Okay? So Jerusalem is over here somewhere, and that's the Mediterranean Sea at that wall. Right? And Nazareth is over right about there. Okay? So Jesus, right, has been, just before this passage, he was down the Jordan River, so he was over here somewhere, down south, with John the Baptist, and then the Spirit of the Lord sent him out into the wilderness. Now, if you're at sort of the Dead Sea area of the Jordan River, basically wilderness is any direction you head from there except north. You know, north gets you into the Jordan River Valley, which is green and beautiful and lush. But basically, if you head east, west, or south, you're in wilderness. So Jesus had lots of opportunity. There was no problem finding wilderness where he was. So he spends some time in the wilderness, and then he goes back into Galilee, right, which is this region all around. And the hills, that's why the pews are here, right, just to sort of portray the hills. And then he goes back to Nazareth, his home territory. Okay, so that's what's going on geographically, if that helps you at all. And then he stands up in the synagogue, and he reads from the prophet Isaiah, and he says, here's how you can tell that you're heading in the right direction. Right? Because the first thing is, this is supposed to be good news for the poor. So there's one of the first ways you can tell that you're heading in the right direction if whatever you're doing is good news for poor people. And we can think about this as spiritually poor, we can think of this as physically poor, right? It's a both-and kind of situation, or emotionally poor. Right? However you understand your own poverty, this is supposed to be good news for you and the poverty in your life. Right? And release to the captives. So this is supposed to be good news for people in jail. Right? And again, we can spiritualize this if we want to, but we probably shouldn't. Right? So right, this, if what we're doing results in more people in prison, wrong direction. Right? It's really helpful to have those sort of basic signposts at the end. That if you're doing something and it has results so that there's more people in prison, you've just done something wrong. And recovery of sight to the blind. So this is supposed to have physical health consequences. And again, we can think about, we can spiritualize this, we can make it emotional blindness or something else, but I think it's also physical, right? It's again, all of those things at the same time. Recovery of sight to the blind. This is supposed to have, and this is why we keep praying for actual physical diseases as well as emotional diseases and sort of the world in general, and the mess and the blindness in the world. Because all of these things are part of this. And release to those who are oppressed. And again, you can sort of think of this on any plane you like, but don't forget the physical. This is all part of, so here's, so Jesus starts out and sets out, look, there's where we're going. There's our guiding light. And we stopped, right, just when the passage got interesting, because it's also important to realize that Jesus had this, and the people are just like really, really great, but if we'd have kept going, in about 8 or 10 verses, they're ready to throw him off a cliff. Right? So it's not just like happy, 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 everything's going to be fine sort of stuff. It's like happy, 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 oh yeah, we're going to throw you off a cliff now. So, right, we gotta get to that emotionally as well. So these are the results, but the results only happen if we follow. These are the results of following the will of God. They're not just the results of sitting around in our pews on Sunday morning. Right? It's like if you go on Pinterest and you see a beautiful cake, right? And you go, wow, I'd like a cake like that. That's the cake I want, right? And so you click on the link and it sends you to the recipe. And you look at the recipe and you go, wow, that's a lot of work. I don't have that pan, and I don't have that ingredient. It's going to take me hours. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a cardboard box, and I'm just going to decorate the cardboard box. And it's going to look just as good. Right? And it would, until someone wanted a piece. Right? And then it's not going to be as good, because it's going to be a cardboard box. Right? And that's sort of the same thing with the will of God. That if we do the will of God, which can be a lot of work, here's the goal, and there are sort of ways of faking the goal. We can fake the joy, and we can sort of work half-heartedly for justice a little bit in our spare time, and all this other stuff. But there's sort of a package to all of this, and the recipe is part of the package, and the actual. The recipe is nice, but the recipe is only meaningful. I mean, having a recipe in your cookbook is different than actually having the food in front of you. And there's work between the recipe in the cookbook and the actual food in front of you. And it's that work that we are called to. So that's what it's sort of like to respond to God. That we are called to this obedience. As tricky as that is, first of all, trying to figure out what it is we're supposed to be obedient to, and then actually going out and doing it. But Ezra reminds us that when we see these things that we're supposed to be doing, we're not supposed to weep and wail and mourn and go, oh, Lord, please be merciful to be a sinner, although, that can be useful occasionally. But Ezra says, no, don't do that. Go celebrate. What a cool idea. Right? That this is our response to this challenge in front of us, is celebrate and then share. This is our way of responding to God. And so I come from the Mennonite tradition, and so we would say celebrate and share and sing. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to sing. And it's in Sing the Journey, number 73. This is our closing song. What I want you to do is I want you to stand. It's the Lord, so it starts out, the Lord lift you up, which means you need some you to speak to. So I'd invite you to stand and face each other and sing this to each other. We're going to sing it through at least twice. We'll see how